Welcome to the Still Christian podcast, where we retrace our steps through evangelical culture, finding a new way forward without abandoning our faith. I'm Katie.
I'm Sarah.
And we're Still Christian. This is our third episode of Season 5, Church Kids. In this series, we explore what adult faith looks like for kids who grew up singing Father Abraham Had Many Sons and watching Salty the Singing Psalm Book videos in Sunday school.
I actually never saw that, and I'm going to look that up later.
Yeah, I'm missing out.
Today, we are...
Have you seen it, Lauren?
I have, but we also were like the Donut Man.
Oh, yeah, I know him.
The Donut Man. We need to add that to the future. Okay, go ahead.
I met him in adult life when I worked for a Christian school.
In real life?
Yeah, I met him in real life, but also like I was introduced to him, like the concept of him as an adult when I worked for a Christian school and went to a conference.
This is too big of a mic drop for an intro. I think we are going to need to do a
We're
separate.
We're going to need to, yeah.
We're sorry on this. This is just
sorry.
Too much. Yeah, please continue.
Today, we are talking with author Lauren Cibene about her recently released memoir, Tiger in a Lifeboat, in which she artfully writes about discovering India, deconstructing faith, and deciding to trust again. Lauren describes herself as equal parts doubter and believer, and in her writing, she explores the messy middle of faith, hope, and humanity. Her work embraces life's big questions with courage and candor, creating space for readers to find their own stories within hers. And I know that we both definitely found that space to explore our own stories as we were reading her memoir. Lauren lives in North Georgia with her husband, Tim. Lauren, welcome. We are so happy to have you here with us.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yay. Well, to start off, could you just tell us a bit about your book? Give us an overview, your book, Tiger in a Lifeboat.
Yeah, totally. So this is, I kind of describe it as like a travel log. So there's an external journey that happens as I am working, but for most of the book, I'm working for an evangelical ministry doing work in India. And so that takes me kind of all over both India, and there's some time I spend in Nepal as well. So there's this external journey that's happening. But there's also an internal journey as I'm wrestling with my upbringing in like the traditional white American evangelical movement. And there's a lot that I just found really wrong about it. And the two journeys kind of collide, and it happens. It's messy. And yeah, it's just kind of an honest look at both of those journeys.
Yeah, it's also a really beautiful sort of companionship through the process of recovering from trauma and sort of embracing grief. At least that's what I found. And along those lines, I'm curious, how did you know that you were ready to share your story through writing a book in particular?
That's a good question. Yeah, I heard Brene Brown one time in an interview. She talked about, the art and the gift of sharing a story like this one where it's very difficult. There are very dark moments. And she said that if the telling of the story, if the reception of the story endangers your healing, that's when you know you're not cleared for takeoff. Your healing is the primary responsibility that you have, and your story is a gift, and I believe that you will get to a point where you can share it to some extent, but you have to go through it first. You have to kind of, you have to give it the space and the time it needs before you get there. And so for me, I reached a point where I was not, the reception of the story, I wasn't afraid of it to the degree that was crippling. Of course, it's always scary. It's always scary to tell your story, but you guys have read it. So there are moments where I am very intentional to withhold some information. And that in itself is kind of evidence that there may be some things that are always just for you. And those guardrails are okay.
Yeah.
Well, and in the book, you referred to the traumatic event that you went through as the breaking. And you have I think maybe it's in like the first chapter that you say like, hey, reader, just so you know, I'm going to refer to this as the breaking, and I'm never going to get into what actually happened because that's not the point. And I thought that was a really interesting, I don't know if you look at it as like an artistic choice or just like a wise mental health choice of like you said, maybe it's not something that it's time to be shared. Maybe it never will be shared like in this context or on this platform because it looks different for every person, that whatever that difficult thing is we've gone through, or maybe an actual traumatic event. And I think it makes your story and the book probably even that much more relatable because it's not like a very specific experience that I might say, well, I didn't go through that, so like I don't totally get it. I
Right.
just thought that was a really interesting choice that you made.
Oh, well, thank you. It definitely was a choice, but I'll tell you like a little behind the scenes. So this started off as a very like messy, bloody blog, and I had the same. I maintained that same kind of like protection over the details, the specifics. The blog got picked up by a writer named Tish Oxenreider, and she shared
Yeah.
it in her newsletter. She's great. She's also a wonderful travel. She's got a good travel writer or book, but
Yeah, she
after
does.
she yeah, At Home in the World, it's so good. But after she shared my writing, my blog, it kind of blew up a little bit, and I was getting like hundreds and hundreds of hits. And what was amazing was I was getting messages from people, and they would read and they would say, I also went through I also survived a really bad wreck, or I also got a really scary diagnosis, or I also was booted from my church community, or something very
Wow.
hyper specific things. And none of
Yeah.
those were my situation, not a
Wow.
single one. And so
Wow.
it gives me chill bumps even now to think about, but when I started approaching like a proper manuscript, I said, I think I'm going to try to maintain that, because that's a big deal for someone to come to your story and see so much of themselves in it that they didn't even
Mm.
hesitate to reach out and say, this is my story too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's really powerful.
That says a lot about the discernment process, though, because for someone to see themselves in your story, you still have to risk something. Like there needs to be enough vulnerability there for and like transparency for someone to kind of grasp onto that or latch onto it and see themselves in there. So well done. You strike that balance really well in this book.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lauren, I would love for you to just take us to India right now and tell us one of my favorite things that you shared in the book, and you kind of refer back to it several times, is these two women on, I forgot to look up how to pronounce the name of the river,
The Ganges.
Ganges, Ganges, thank you. The two women on the Ganges. Tell us that story, please. I would love
Sure.
to hear it, and tell us what it meant for you.
Yeah. So to set the scene, the river Ganges is a holy river in the Hindu faith. They believe that it flows through our world and also the underworld. And so it's this kind of liminal spiritual space. And they also believe that when you die, if you happen to die, or your remains are put into the river, you are spirited immediately away into paradise. So it's steeped in all of this, meaning, and it flows along the whole, like a large portion of the country. But there's one city in particular that's very, like, I guess, tied to the Ganges, and that's Varanasi. Varanasi is, they say, it's the oldest continually occupied city in the world, and you really feel it when you walk through it. I mean, there's cobblestone streets that are older than our country. Like you walk through and you just kind of feel that, the weight of that. And because of the proximity to the river, as the closer that you get to the river walking through Varanasi, the more the air smells like smoke, because there are cremation fires that happen along the river. In my own like recovery process from my trauma, my breaking, death was always kind of this shadow that hung over me. So it was a very, like, personally, it was a very weighty thing to be in this environment. So I was already kind of on edge as we were walking through it and experiencing Varanasi. In the evening, we went out on the river. We got a boat and we were sitting on the river watching the ceremony that happens every single day of the year. There's a ceremony that happens in the evening for the Hindus who were cremated that day. So our boat is, it comes up to the ceremony site, and there's hundreds of boats around us, and they're so like thick side by side that there's kids walking from boat to boat selling chai and postcards and water bottles. And I mean, it's loud, and there's like bells ringing, and it's just already very, very stimulating. So I was a little overwhelmed by everything. And I happened to notice in the boat directly in front of ours, there were two women. They looked to be mourners. So they were local, and they were turned around and they were just staring at me. And this is something that's very different from like my Southern American culture, where you're taught that it's very rude to stare at people. That's just not the case in India. It's not a rude thing. There's like over a billion people there, so there's like these personal boundaries that are just not the same, because there's so
Yeah.
many people. So anyway, they're staring at me, and it felt very off-putting initially. It felt very intrusive, with everything else that was happening. It was a lot. But I had like a moment as I was sitting there where I felt like these women were representing something else. Like I felt it was like kind of this watershed moment where, you know, the struggles with my faith and the struggles with trauma recovery, like it all kind of came to a head. And I felt like not only were these two women watching me and waiting to see what I would do, but the whole of the universe was waiting and watching to see, what then will you do now? Like, what are you going to do next? And, you know, that's intimidating. It's like a huge thing to feel. But you know, initially, as when I first noticed that they were staring, I was looking away and I was trying to, like, you know, avoid their gaze, and they just kept staring and kept staring. And, you know, as I worked through it, I came to a place where I was like, you know, I can't speak their language. I can't have this like moment of connection. I can't try to like co-regulate with them. You know, like there's really not a whole lot I can do except be present in the moment, whatever that is, you know, with all of the weightiness and the feeling of like I'm making this choice, and, you know, I can't do much but be present. And so in that moment, I decided to be present. And so I looked back at them and we kind of shared this beautiful moment where I acknowledged them and as much as I could. And it was a really beautiful moment.
Yeah, I love that moment too. You talk about on one of your trips, you and some of, I think it's your colleagues, or I can't remember if it's your first trip, but you were sitting around a table and everyone was kind of discussing what they believe and what their faith is. And then when it came to you, you kind of blurted out something that surprised you in the midst of your deconstruction. Can you share that moment with us and kind of the meaning that you're still making from
Yeah,
that?
yeah. So this was the first trip, and the first trip there was no real religious connotation. My husband and I had always wanted to see India, so we just decided to go. So we were in a group. It was under 30 was the rules of the tour. So we were all under 30. We were like in our late 20s. There were a couple Canadians, a handful of Australians. So we kind of all converged and met in this hyper religious place that is India. So yeah, eventually there was a moment where we were all kind of like, we had visited shrines together and temples, and we had seen like ceremonies. So of course, eventually we're going to talk about, you know, so what do y'all think? You know, what do you believe? And yeah, like I mentioned, like the whole first part of that trip, I was really wrestling with a lot of my deconstruction and kind of understanding like the damaging beliefs I had held my whole life. So to say that I was a Christian, like it didn't feel right. And honestly, I didn't like, if in my brain had I tried to provide an answer, I think it would have been messy and weird. But in the moment, like you mentioned, I just kind of said I'm a Jesus person. And I think it's great that I didn't think about it. I like that that's just what happened.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you guys, but I feel like the term Christian is very loaded. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially these days.
Yeah, there's like political baggage and cultural baggage, and like there's all of these things. And, you know, that's to say nothing of, you know, when someone hears it, their own individual experience, you know, it could be equated to hypocrisy or to exclusion. So there's all of these things that word is like, it just, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in my primary descriptor being coupled with those things. Um, so so yeah, I still to this day use the term Jesus person because it feels right.
Yeah. I'm curious how that answer was received in the group.
Well, they said, and this still happens, and I kind of love this, but they say, well, what do you mean? What do you mean, Jesus person? And I love that then I get to
Yeah.
then say,
Define that.
yes, I get to define that. It's not that, you know, it's not the reputation of the word, like that is already filling in the blanks for them.
Mm.
I'm able to step in and say, this is what I mean.
Yeah.
It's a really
Yeah.
sacred opportunity, and I imagine that's the weight and specificity that a Christian used to carry, but
Yeah,
it doesn't
yeah.
anymore.
And it
as
was
a little
honestly
Christ or Christ follower.
exactly, yeah. And it was almost like a derogatory, like it was sometimes used as a derogatory thing, like, oh, you think you're a little Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just all I don't know, that richness has gone from the term
Yeah,
now.
for sure. Yeah.
And we've talked about, we've talked about this distinction, maybe just in different ways, but on the podcast, talking about like, you know, Christianity, what Christianity actually is at its core and the definition of it, like that's a good thing. But it's the cultural Christianity. It's all these connotations, everything you just said, that make us like, oh, I don't really want to be grouped into that, you
Yes.
know? And just the difference between like there's Christ and then there's Christianity. And what do you mean by Christianity? And just all of that. It's so complex.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I feel like the phrase Jesus person is like just like sincere and odd enough to be like the perfect answer. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And it should be a little odd. Like the early
Mm-hmm.
church was super weird. Like,
That's true.
Mhm.
let's make weird again.
Yeah.
I want to say, but I'm like, we might need to edit this out. I wanted to say, make Christianity weird again.
Make it weird.
um, okay, so tell us about. Whoa, Katie!
Sorry, I'm writing something
Speaking
down.
of slamming fists on the desk, tell us about your decision making process as a Jesus person when you accepted a job in ministry after just being done with American evangelicalism. I want to know what that was like for you.
Yeah. Okay. This is still a tough one for me. And there's
You
something
don't still
about
work there, right?
no, I
Okay.
do not. No. But there's something about like especially when you write memoirish things, it's like sitting down with your past self. And it's
Mhm.
tough not to let my acquired knowledge or changed convictions to like tint that person. You
Yeah.
know, I think that that person that I was, she was very optimistic. She was very fresh out of deconstruction, and I think I fell into a pitfall that a lot of people fall into when they have deconstructed and maybe they discover they're more progressive leaning, and that is that they have different beliefs, but they haven't examined the framework with which they believe those things. And so it's like they go from obsession with ideological purity on one side of the spectrum to the other side of the spectrum with the same kind of obsession with ideological purity, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Mhm.
And so I
I'm not sure I
had,
fully understand. Can you expand on that a little bit?
yeah, so I think that, you know, like in my upbringing, I was a home educated student, you know, at home with my parents, very much in the evangelical world. And so we were taught, you know, there's one right answer. There's one right answer and everybody else is wrong. And we happen to know the right answer. And the pitfall for me once I deconstructed was I'm now in a different camp, but I'm still slouching into that belief that I am the only one with the right answer and everyone
Mm-hmm.
else has the wrong answer, which in itself is harmful to have that kind of like arrogance. But it was out of that kind of place that I was in where I was like, no, I can, like, I know now I know the right answer and I can go in and I can be this example and you know, like change it from the inside
Mhm.
essentially.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's right or wrong. I know that it ended up being damaging for me because it was tough. It was really tough. But in the moment, and I write a little bit about it in the book, in a chapter that took me literally a year to write, to look back on that and try to figure out, wait, what was I thinking? What was it that made me say, yeah, let's do this evangelical job thing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I can imagine it being tough because of the pressure you're putting on yourself then to like be the change you wish to see. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's that's a heavy weight to carry
Yeah. Yeah,
that
it's a lot.
kind of no one asked you to, but other than you yourself. And I mean like I can relate to that. Like I definitely can understand that mindset. I'm curious, this feels kind of relevant, but in a different context. Do you have thoughts about short term missions?
I do have thoughts.
I knew you would. I knew you would.
What's y'all's
Share them,
context?
please.
Did you grow up like doing short-term missions?
Mhm.
Later in life, yeah.
Okay, later
Yeah,
in
Katie, I
life.
feel like you're what I'm thinking of for you, Katie, knowing what you've gone through is very different than what I did. I'll
It
give you
is.
very briefly, Lauren. Like I went in high school, was it 2 times or 3 times? Went to Jamaica, built a basketball court. Um, sorry, I just
Single-handedly.
feel like I have to like it just is great. It's like the best example. Went to Interestingly, went to New York City. I live in New York City now. went to New York City, and which was like 4 hours away from where I grew up. And we ran a vacation Bible school at a church in the Bronx. And like the, you know, the, how can I like not take over this whole podcast episode with my thoughts on this? I'll just give it to you very briefly. The New York City one was so illuminating for me because I realized, wow, I actually really like to be in a city and I like working with kids in an urban context. And so later in life, I'm like after college, I moved to New York City to be a teacher, and I met my husband there, and I am raising my kids here, speaking a language I didn't grow up speaking. Like it was
Wow.
really, it was incredible
It
for me.
changed
And
your
like
life.
it
Yeah.
was life changing for me. And so there was like that piece of it for me. I don't know what the church where we were, I don't know what it was like outside of us being there, but I do know that they didn't normally do vacation Bible school. And so we were able to like offer them this thing. But that's not to say they didn't do other sort of children's ministry things. I'm not sure. You have this quote when I'm trying. I was gonna find us some context, but I don't remember the specific context. But you have this quote in your book that says, "Once you're in India, you're looking at the people around you. They were here, walking around on our planet for hundreds of days prior to my arrival, and they will go on, living their lives, fighting their battles, loving their people, long after I head back home." And I just like, I love that because I think it
Mm.
is that awareness of the fact that like these people who you just saw for the first time today don't exist just because you know about them now. They
Right.
there it's the world is so much bigger than you and your bubble and what you do and do not know, you know. I
Hmm.
just think that was like a really profound noticing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost a little bit cliche because I think that once you have the realization and someone else says it, it's like, well, yeah, of course. Of course they were there. And of course you're just like a face in a passing bus. But when it really does hit you and you really like you get it bone deep and that realization, that that's a paradigm shift for sure.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel dizzy with the amount of life that's like when I consider just the different communities I know around the world, just the ones I know of. And then it
Mhm.
like takes my breath away. And when I'm thinking of like people in all these different countries living a life, like crying, dreaming their dreams, I'm just like, I just can't handle like the wicked
Yeah.
reality. It's
It
so
is
much.
overwhelming.
Yeah. But it's also really, really beautiful, I think, too.
Mhm. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if this is the most relevant time to bring this up, but I'll just see if I can sneak it in here. Because one thing that I really loved in your book was when you were when you started working for this ministry and you were talking to someone. I'll just read the quote. For example, one of the things some of my new teammates and other Christians in my circle say when they hear I've been to India is, "I'm sure you can just feel the darkness in a place like that." And the reason I thought of it now is because I feel like again it's this othering, like, oh my goodness, you went to India, God bless you, that must have just been so dark, so hard for you, you know.
Mhm.
And just making these assumptions about people and places that you're unfamiliar with, and so therefore there's something obviously quote unquote negative about them. It's so narrow-minded, and sorry Americans, it just feels so American.
It is. No, it is. Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. And it's, I was speaking to a man who grew up in India. He, is in the ministry world now living in America. But from his perspective, he's like, people say that kind of stuff to me all the time. And it's heartbreaking. Like, can you imagine someone saying that about the place where you grew up and the place where your parents live and the place where your grandparents are buried? And gosh, like, I mean, I'm impressed that he is even in the ministry world still. Like that would be enough
Yeah.
for me to be like, peace, like I'm out.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's weird, and I think it's distinctly American in that most Americans do not expose themselves to these other cultures. So when they do, when they land in New York City or something and they're brought in face to face with other cultures, they're very uncomfortable. And I
Hmm.
think they perceive that as like, I'm picking up on something spiritual. Like, this is something on my spiritual radar. And I'm like, baby, no, you might just be jet lagged. You might just be dehydrated, or you're having an experience that you've never had before.
Yeah,
And
culture shock. And
yes.
being around something that like you don't understand. Like I, because I also find it It's interesting that you're saying that it is heartbreaking, and I don't disagree with you, but I think my gut reaction was like, that's so offensive. Like, that's so rude. And I hear people often say about New York, or even the specific neighborhood where I live, like that it's dangerous. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you don't understand it, it might seem that way. Or like, I don't walk around outside by myself at 3 a.m. Like, I think
Right.
maybe in most places in the world, I would feel uncomfortable doing that. But I find it like very offensive. I'm like, this is my home. Like you said, this is my home. And if anything, if you're saying that it's a dark place, it's dangerous, whatever, to me, that's saying something about you. Like, that sounds like a you
Right.
problem, not
Yeah.
a this place problem.
Yeah, 100%. And the only reason that I say it's heartbreaking is because like you're missing out. You're missing out on
Yeah.
the richness of humanity. And that
Yeah.
like to your point, yeah, that is a you problem. But also like my heart breaks for you because you're just missing out.
I love how you pointed out that no one says that about Paris. Like, oh, you're going to
Yeah.
Paris.
Yeah.
Like you
Or
were
even
saying.
in Atlanta, I live in Atlanta and we're the sex trafficking capital of the world. Nobody's ever said that to me about Atlanta.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's really revealing. Okay, so speaking of missions, something I'd forgotten but loved rediscovering through your book was that, like, church history tells us that the disciple Thomas was one of the first people to bring the gospel to India. And you had this really beautiful reframe on doubting Thomas. Could you shed some light on that for us and just share with our listeners kind of like the new understanding that you have of him because of your
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah, this is my guy, Doubting Thomas. He always gets a bad rap. He's always just like a little bit above Judas, you know?
Yeah,
Like
rankings.
if we fall into that trap that the disciples are like, who's the best, we do the same thing and Thomas always gets the short end of the stick. And I when I was digging into his story after coming face to face allegedly with his remains, I don't know, I'm still a little bit cynical about about like that world, but yes, maybe. But yeah, I dug into his story and I don't know. I actually, when I was reading the play by play, like all of the disciples, when Jesus appears to them, or the ones that he does appear to, they're in this room. It's kind of cowardly. Like the women have told them that he is risen, and they're still kind of hunkered in this room. Jesus shows up, and they get to see with their eyes. Thomas isn't with them, and that was a huge, realization for me to be like they kind of gave him crap, but he didn't have the same opportunities that they did. And at the same time, his response when the disciples come to tell him, and he says, "Until I see with my eyes," that actually feels like an extremely empathetic response, in my opinion. Because I mean, if you put yourself in his shoes, he's watched his friend be crucified. I mean, this is a brutal process that was meant to take days, and he could not stop it. He had to just stand there and bear witness. So for me, trying to step into his skin and empathize with him when he says that, it felt like he was saying, until I see my friend with, and like especially with his wounds, I just cannot believe, like his fullness is too big to fake, and I want to see it. And like, good for you, Thomas. Like it makes me kind of want to cheer, because it's a devotion and a love that he's showing, in my opinion.
Not a weakness. Yeah, because it has always been presented to us as like, Thomas, like, you don't believe anything, do you? But yeah, that's such a beautiful reframe.
Yeah. He does have, like, he has a reputation as kind of a cynic. When Lazarus died, then when they got word, he said, I guess we should just like all go die anyway. Like he made this very like pessimistic response. And he could have said that same thing, when his buddies came and said, no, Jesus is alive. He could have, slouched into that. But I feel like it's really beautiful that he didn't, that he left the door open for hope, but he had stipulations. And I'm like, I think good for you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Lauren, this season is called Church Kidz with a Z. And
because we're cool.
Because we're cool.
Yes.
See, she gets it. She
gets
it.
Yeah,
she's
knows
like,
how cool we are.
No explanation needed, guys. Got it. And the loose inspiration is the child stars. Where are they now? So church kids, where are they now? Is kind of what we come back to with each of these episodes. And so we kind of want to ask you the question, like, as a former church kid, where would you say you are now?
This is strange. The answer would have been different even just a few weeks ago.
Mm.
But I still, like I mentioned, I still claim to be a Jesus person. I just can't seem to get away from this disruptive carpenter who was executed by the state. So I'm still a Jesus person. I am about to start seminary in a week,
Wow.
which is something I never would have imagined. I did not have plans to do that, but I have started because I've published this book, and I started talking about this just with the goal of destigmatizing the deconstruction process and the reconstruction process. But I'm starting to get preaching opportunities. So, and I am very much an introvert. That is not my skill. I mean, part of the book is me talking about being super nervous to public speak and to speak in front of people. But yeah, I, one door has opened and another door is open, and I just keep stepping through the next one. And so I will be starting at Emory University in 6 days. Yeah.
Emory is great. Yeah, I've heard
That's
really good things
amazing.
about them. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's really exciting, Lauren.
Thank you.
So, what might you say as a follow up? What might you say to the church kid who sort of grew up attached to dogmatic certainty, but finds themselves experiencing doubt now as an adult?
Man, this is tough. It's tough because I know how scary it feels. I know how unendingly lonely it feels. I mean, if you're going through something like what I went through, it feels like your world is shredding.
Mm.
It's just coming apart at the seams. And so I know what that feels like. But at the same time, what I would say is the process, the doubts, the questions, you can't outrun them. They will follow you. So it's best to just sit down and make them tea. Honestly, just sit down. Um, and the process, it will be painful, but this is what it feels like to come home to yourself. Yeah, and it's very scary, but it's also very beautiful. So yeah, so don't rush it. Sit with it for as long as you need to. Yeah, this tough. I'm getting emotional.
Thank you.
It's hard.
It's hard.
Well, it sounds like I feel like what I'm getting from what you're saying right now and from reading your book, it is a difficult but worthwhile journey.
100%. 100% worthwhile.
Yeah. Lauren, where can we find and support your work?
Yeah, thank you. I have a Substack called it's laurenscibene.substack.com, but it's called The Rest of Us, and it's meant to be a place for people who are kind of the Sarah Bussey calls us the wanderers and the wanderers, and people who are a little bit spiritually homeless. I don't remember who said this. I think it might have been Richard Rohr, but he calls it the edge of the inside, and that's kind of where I pitch my tent. Like, yes, technically, I am a Jesus person technically, but I'm like right on the edge of the inside. So my Substack is, I hope to be a place for people like that.
It's really great. Highly recommend.
Thank you.
And what would you say, I kind of want to ask, like, what inspired you to write this book? I know that you want to help people with it, right? That's the point of sharing your story. Like you said, a story, sharing a story is so powerful. So what is your hope for readers of your book?
Yeah. There is a poem and the author's name escapes me, but the poem says, the small man makes cages for everyone he knows, while the sage, who has to duck his head when the moon is low, drops keys all night long for the beautiful rowdy prisoners. And that's what I wanted this book to be, was just a key dropped for someone who, it like me, grew up in this very rigid framework of evangelicalism and is starting to quake in their boots because they're like, no, this doesn't add up anymore. This math just is not mathin'. And I've got these questions and these doubts, and I feel like there's nowhere safe for me to take them. I wanted to destigmatize that. I wanted to be just a little light in the darkness that is like, hey, no, me too. You're not crazy, you're not broken, you're not a failure. This is you're embarking on a journey.
Thank you. It definitely is that. To close, is there an excerpt or quote from your book that you'd like to leave us with?
Ooh, let's see. The very last part of my book, there's a section where I speak directly to the person at the beginning, who I was at the very, very beginning. And
Yeah.
I think it applies to a lot of people. So I'll read something from that. You are in a deep pit, but you will not be here forever. It's hard in this moment to believe it, but you will rise up off that floor. You'll do the hard, painful work to cauterize that wound threatening to bleed you out. And yes, it will burn like hell and you will scream. Scream, baby, through gritted teeth and anger and anguish. Scream until your throat is raw with the injustice of it. When the smoke clears and your lungs finally give out, you'll wipe your eyes, you'll stand up, and you'll live. Something magical will happen to you in the years after this crushing blow. It will bloom through your overwhelming pain, your surging panic, your crushing despair. In time, you will see that while you were pressed to the ground, white-knuckled, barely breathing, you became the person you were always meant to be.
Thank you, Lauren.
Take
I was
that
hoping you would
one.
read that.
Thank you.